Hello, everybody. My name is Eddy Savage, and I'm an expedition leader with Natural Habitat Adventures. Today, I'm going to teach you about Northern Lights smartphone photography. We go to Churchill in February and March. That's when the Northern Lights are best visible. We have cold temperatures, minus 40 Fahrenheit is pretty common. Minus 20 to minus 40 Fahrenheit is the usual temperature, so it's going to be cold. And we're sitting in a place that's underneath the aurora oval. The Northern Lights can occur over 300 nights a year, but of course, in order to see the Northern Lights, we can't have any clouds. And so going in February and March when it is cold, the colder the air, the less cloud cover is likely to be, and the higher the percentage of nights where aurora borealis is visible. Clear, cold, and dark is the name of the game, and that's what Churchill is during February and March. So that's why we go. The Northern Lights are often referred to as nature's most beautiful phenomenon. They begin their life at the sun, where charged particles stream through space anywhere from 300 to 500 miles per second towards the Earth. When they get close to the Earth, those charged particles interact with our magnetosphere. Our magnetosphere deflects most of these charged particles, and some of these charged particles get trapped within the magnetosphere, where they are kind of dragged out behind Earth, much like a comet's tail. When they're very far behind Earth, those magnetic lines that the charged particles are trapped in collide with each other, slingshotting charged particles back towards Earth. As those charged particles get closer and closer to Earth, at about 200 miles above our head, they begin to interact or collide with molecules of oxygen and nitrogen in the Earth's upper atmosphere. This collision provides charge or excites the molecules of oxygen and nitrogen. And in order for those molecules to go back to a normal state, they release that energy in the form of a photon. The photon, being light, is what we see in the night sky as greens, reds, violets, sometimes blues, green being the most common. The Northern Lights come out at night, and this means we need to take our smartphones, point them up to the sky, and photograph the aurora borealis while it's pitch dark. In the past, smartphones really failed here. Their entire camera computer system was not capable enough to allow us to manipulate settings to take pictures while it was dark. However, come 2019, we're starting to see quite an increase in image sensor capabilities, with a lot of modern smartphones having automatic programs that can sense when it's dark and take pictures of the night sky. What this means is our smartphones are using a combination of things. One of them is ISO. This means it's controlling how sensitive the image sensor is to light. The next feature is the shutter speed, and this, ranging from 1/100th or 1/1000th of a second to capture objects in motion, to opening it way up to maybe 1 second to 5 seconds to 10 seconds to allow all sorts of light to come into the image sensor. The next feature is the aperture or the speed of the glass. So this is how quickly light can transfer from the outside world through the glass or the lens on your smartphone to the image sensor to create that picture. So what this means for us in our Northern Lights adventure is if we want to capture smartphone photos, there's a few realities we have to face. One of them is we are going to be standing outside in 0 degrees Fahrenheit to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit and everything in between. It might even be windy, which could make it even colder. We are also going to be holding our hands out in front of us or having the smartphone on a tripod and using our fingers to delicately touch the screen, touch that shutter button to take the picture. And each picture is going to take between 1 and 10 seconds. Now, there is certainly a reality, which is that hands, feet, faces, and our cameras are going to get extremely cold. And so probably the most important part of smartphone photography is learning how to manage the cold and how to manage the battery on our camera so that it doesn't die. If you're on the fence whether or not to bring your camera or your smartphone on this adventure, or you can always bring both, let's look at the pros and cons of each. So if we start with our cameras, cameras can typically take higher quality images. You just have way more maneuverability and capability of changing the image quality via the menu on your camera. you have a lot more control over your shutter speed, your aperture, your ISO, and so you can really change and control the quality of your images. And also, if you're shooting in RAW, for example, you can take those pictures back home, plug them into your computer, use a program like Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop, and you can edit your images quite easily and quite effectively without a lot of data loss or without creating image quality loss. Some cons, of course, is you need specific equipment. You need to have the camera. You're going to need a lot of batteries for your camera. You probably want a wide angle lens that is relatively fast or has an aperture of f2.8, f3.5, or f4, somewhere in that range, or faster is better. There's probably going to be, regardless of what you're doing, some post-processing. And there's, of course, a more complex photo process. So going onto your camera that's set up on the tripod and manually adjusting all of those dials may be a little bit too much for some. It might be completely manageable for others. Now, when we look at smartphones and we look at the pros and cons of smartphones, they're easy to use. There's no specific equipment. You can just oftentimes hold them up to the sky, hit a button, take a picture, and away you go. The images are quickly shareable, and they're not going to have extraordinary quality, so you could probably print them on a 4x6, but if you wanted to make maybe an 11x14 print or larger, you're going to really see image quality loss. But smaller, they're fine. Social media, it's fine. And post-processing can often be done on your phone. So you probably have an image editing program on your phone. That's totally fine to use for Northern Lights photography from your smartphone. The cons, as I was saying, it's medium to low quality images that come from the smartphone. You can do your best to kind of change that within the settings. Your battery is likely to die quite randomly, and I had this on my last trip just a couple weeks ago. Somebody had their smartphone out, it was registering 80% and it died, and then they took it back in, warmed it up, charged it up again, and it was actually still at 75%. So the cold does really tricky things to smartphones. And of course, being a smartphone, you will have less control over the picture, and you may have a harder time adjusting some of those settings using a glove or a touchscreen friendly gloved hand on that screen while it's dark and cold. Looking at the different smartphone models, I have found that of iPhone, Samsung, and Google Pixel 3, essentially all phones manufactured around 2019 and beyond, they are absolutely fine for photographing the Northern Lights. Most of them have a built-in night mode, which you can either access from a menu, or it will automatically turn on when you point this phone to the sky. Of course, the more recent your phone is, if it's an iPhone 13 or 14 or Samsung S22 or Google Pixel 6 or 7, you are going to be in really good shape for night photography. So I've done a little bit of research for us, and I've found these models of Apple phones. Pause it here, have a read through, see if your Apple phone is on there, your iPhone is on there. These are the ones that work with night photography. They have a built-in night mode. So if your phone is on this list, you should be able to take your phone, point it up to the sky, and it will automatically go to a night mode, which allows you to take better pictures of the Northern Lights. And Samsung phones, same thing. I went onto their website. These are the phones they've released that have a night mode built in. So relatively recently, I think I've got the S20 and the A52s. They both have night mode. I can just go into the menu setting, click it on, and then point to the sky and get some pictures of the Northern Lights. So pause it here. If you have a Samsung phone, make sure yours is on there. If not, that's not the end of the world. I've got another slide for that coming up. And Google Pixels, they've been a long time one of the leaders for their camera capabilities. They've had since the Google Pixel 3 night sight in their camera menu. With Google Pixel 4a and newer, you can hold those phones right up to the sky, and it should automatically go to night sight. If not, you should be able to find night sight in your menu. If your smartphone was not on that list, it's not the end of the world. You will likely still be able to take Northern Lights photos with your smartphone. I will warn you now that some of the older phones that weren't on those lists, the capability of the camera is only so good, and so it's not likely to get a very good picture of the Northern Lights, but you can fudge the settings and make it work and get a picture of the northern lights with those smartphones. It'll just be a little more complicated and a little harder to do. So what you need to do, if you do have an older phone and you'd still like to give it a try, is go to your app store on the iOS or Apple iPhone system. You're going to want to get an app like Nightcap Pro or Northern Lights Photo Taker app. And then on Android, you can go into your menu, and if you have a Pro mode, you can go there and manually adjust the settings to ideally take Northern Lights pictures. Or you can get something like Camera FV Lite, which will do the same thing. It'll go in and you'll be able to manually adjust your settings so that you can take a picture of the Northern Lights. When we talk about gear and what the best gear to bring on this trip will be, some things to keep in mind. We have tripods up there. We have tripods we can lend you. Easy. We also recently picked up some phone mounts, some smartphone mounts, which are great, super easy to use. You can even use them using a glove liner. You're going to want to get a pair of glove liners with touchscreen capabilities, and you're going to want to test it. It has to be easy to use. So if you're going to get some glove liners, make sure they work with your phone. Make sure that it's easy to swipe through different things, hit buttons, change settings, that kind of stuff. Test it all before you bring home those glove liners, and test that before you bring those glove liners on the trip with you. The most important feature of glove liners is, of course, warmth. But if we're looking at smartphone photography, being able to open up your photo app or change the brightness on your screen or anything like that while you're outside is important. So I find the synthetic ones work the best. There's like polyester glove liners that have a nice kind of fingertip touchscreen adapter. Those work the best. I really like those. Next is hand warmers. We've got those up in Churchill. We'll have some that we can give you, but also if you have your own hand warmers you want to bring or something that works for you, do that. Not a bad idea to bring a dry bag. This is something we recommend to people photographing on photo trips and with cameras in general, is if you let your phone or you let your camera get extremely cold and you want to bring it inside to a warm space, you can get condensation happen very quickly on the inside of the camera or the inside of your phone. Of course, moisture and electronics don't go well. And so having a dry bag, or even for a smartphone, a Ziploc bag, a heavy-duty Ziploc bag, just allows you to trap the dry air from outside and protect your phone from the condensation when you bring it inside. The next thing is a microfiber lens cloth. Both cameras and smartphones deal with this. They can get some ice crystals falling or frost, or maybe you breathe on the viewfinder, or you breathe on the screen of your phone and you want to kind of clean that off. That's a really great idea. Also, a portable power bank. There's little smartphone size power banks that can recharge your phone multiple times. Yes, we have charging facilities at the hotel, but our nights when we go out to some of our viewing locations, some of them are quite remote, completely off grid, and of course we're away from city lights, so it's nice and dark. Those don't necessarily have a place to plug in your phone and charge it throughout the night. So a portable power bank with a charge cord for your smartphone is a great idea. So if you're outside and it gets cold and you put it in your pocket, come inside for a little bit, then you can hook up your portable power bank and recharge your phone throughout the night, so you have more opportunity to photograph during your time out. And then a headlamp, folks. This goes both for photographers, non-photographers, anybody. Your headlamp should have a red light. The red light protects night vision. So if you blast a white light around, it's going to ruin everyone's night vision, and you won't be able to see the northern lights as clearly. You won't be able to see where you're walking as clearly. So by having a headlamp with a red light, it only shoots typically enough light so you can, adjust what you need to on your tripod or adjust what you need to on your smartphone or camera without blinding everybody around you. It's important to find a headlamp with a red light to bring, and also practice with it so you know how to turn on the red light. I like to say that practice makes perfect, and so preparing for your Northern Lights photography experience is a great idea. When we're up in Churchill, make sure your phone, batteries, power banks, etc. are all charged up at the hotel before we head out for the evening. You can assign pockets on your parka. I like to give a certain pocket, my chest pocket usually on my fleece vest is where my batteries go. And then I like to have my lens cloth in another pocket. And I like to know where my hand warmers are in other pockets, that kind of stuff. So assigning pockets on your parka is always a good idea. Practice with your headlamp at home, practice with your camera at home, or practice with your smartphone at home. And practice using your phone with your glove liners. So it's not a bad idea to go outside one night and practice everything that I'm doing here before you come up to Churchill. You know, it's going to work the same shooting into a dark sky. It's going to kind of turn on to the night mode. So you might as well practice all the settings we're about to discuss. Kind of point that phone up to the sky and practice using your glove liners and all that kind of stuff. The idea is, and this is from experience and watching people do this, is it's a lot easier to practice your smartphone settings and everything when it's nice and comfortable in your home, instead of trying to figure it all out when you're standing out there and it's -40, extremely cold. It'll give you an advantage. You'll be way better prepared if you can practice with some of these things at home before you come out. Everybody, let's get into the iPhone night photography tips. So the night mode icon and length of shutter speed should automatically appear when you point your phone to the sky. So go into a dark room or go into the night sky. If it's very dark out, hold your iPhone up. And if you have everything set up right, it should show you exactly how long it's going to be. You can see the little icon there. It kind of looks like a half moon. And it says 3 seconds. That's how long the photo is going to take. And you can see next to that, there's a little lightning bolt. That lightning bolt is your flash. So for Northern Lights photography, we want to make sure that flash is off. That one there. So turn that flash off. Yellow moon tells you where the shutter is or what the shutter time is. And then last but not least, this here is like the live setting on iPhones. You're going to want to make sure that live recording is off. So if that's on or the flash is on, it's going to mess up your Northern Lights photography on the iPhone. So make sure those are off. Your next steps, you'll see here, if you want to adjust your shutter speed, you can either slide that little sun next to the square up, or you can slide it down. If you slide it up, it's going to try to make the scene brighter, potentially lengthen your shutter speed. You slide it down, it's going to make it darker. But either way, by sliding that little dial up or down, what that does is it just changes the length of the shutter speed of your automatic night mode setting. And that, folks, is how to photograph the Northern Lights with your iPhone. It's set up so it's meant to be very easy. Hold your phone up to the dark sky. The little moon icon shows up. Make sure your flash is off. Make sure the live recording is off. And then you can tap the screen once and slide that slider up and down to adjust your shutter speed, and then hit the photo take button, a little white circle down at the bottom, and hold your phone nice and steady, and you will have a picture of the Northern Lights. Samsung phones are quite easy to take Northern Lights pictures as well. Instead of automatically sensing when it's dark, they require you to go into their camera menu where you can find the night mode setting. You just hit that little night, looks like a crescent moon. That takes you into the night camera, and then you should be able to hold your camera up to the sky and take pictures of the Northern Lights just by tapping that little white circle at the bottom. To make further adjustments, you can tap the screen in the middle, and you'll see the little dial you can swipe from left to right. That will allow you to make further changes to the exposure. So swipe it so that it's brighter. It'll do a longer exposure to allow more light in. Swipe it so it's darker. It'll do a shorter shutter speed to allow less light in. For Google Pixel users out there, it's slightly different again. You go into the camera app and you can swipe on the bottom whether you want to be in portrait mode or if you want to be in night sight. Night sight is the name of the Google Pixel night photography mode. And so you go to night sight, hold your camera up to the sky, and it should automatically adjust for the setting. Another tip that they give you, so that's what it looks like there with a little crescent moon. Another tip that Google gives is if you tap that icon on the right-hand side, that little circle, that will allow you to adjust the focus, and you can adjust the focus on your Google Pixel to far, which I imagine kind of coincides with infinity, and allows a lot of the stars and everything to be in focus. So it won't try focusing on anything close to you. Some models also have astrophotography mode, but astrophotography mode may have too long an exposure to be useful for the northern lights. Some of the astrophotography mode settings I was reading about could have exposures up to a minute, and that's not exactly what we want if we're trying to capture the northern lights. So for now, I would stick to night sight and allow it to do kind of those 1 to 10 second shutter speeds for you. I hope the concept of taking pictures at night with your smartphone seems simple enough. The smartphone capabilities have really increased in the last few years, and so it makes a world of difference to us when we're standing out there and we want to get those good pictures. We don't have to fiddle around with a camera if we don't want to, and we can have all kinds of great images to share with our families and friends. So I want to offer you a little bit of Northern Lights photography composition notes. This is, you can get a whole bunch of pictures just pointing your phone up into the sky of the Northern Lights, but I find having a little bit of compositional knowledge will allow you to get the best shots. So just think about this. You don't have to do this. Just think about this when you're out there photographing. So the rule of thirds is always fun. If you put some of the subject down in the bottom third of the picture, and then, whether that's the trees, like in this image that I'm showing you here, and then the night sky and the aurora up in the top 2/3, that's a great way to kind of fraction off your picture. Finding a good foreground subject is always a good idea. There's all sorts of unique and interesting foregrounds, whether that's a really interestingly shaped snowdrift, or we're out at Wapusk Adventures and we're looking at Dave Daly's teepee, or we are at the Aurora Domes and we have kind of the old military style building that is there, or we're tucked away at the Goose Creek cabin. The cabin itself is beautiful, but also the boreal forest and the trees, the spruce trees that we see all around us, and the tamarack trees are extremely photogenic as well. So I encourage you to find that. I also like to use people. So people doing things, people staring up at the sky in awe, or people even taking pictures with their cameras and tripods. It makes for a really great connection to the scene and provides scale to the night sky. Here's an example of the rule of thirds that I would like to share with you. So we draw those lines across. You can see that in the bottom third, I've got people. So the bottom third of my foreground is my guests that are standing there. How cooperative of them in -40. And then the middle third is the aurora borealis and the people's faces. And then the top third is the night sky and the stars. And I also want you to notice that the vertical yellow lines also divide the image so that the people are very centered in the picture. So that's one way to use the rule of thirds. Now, it's always a good idea to get our smartphones set up before we actually go outside, or set up for the evening. And these are some tips and tricks that I want to share with you that make that a lot easier. They make the battery last longer on your camera. They make it easier to take pictures. So first one is turn your phone into airplane mode. This way, if you are connected to the cell networks and we're in range of a cell tower, you're not going to get a random notification. If you get a notification or your phone vibrates, it might kick you out of the photo app. It might kick you out of the picture you're taking. And it also will save batteries because your phone will not be constantly searching for a network. So turn your phone into airplane mode. That includes Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, etc. It'll save a lot of battery in the long run. Close all apps on your phone except for your photo app. So the photo app should be the only one that's going to allow you to take as many pictures as you can on the short battery life of smartphones in the cold. You can also turn down the brightness on your phone. So head into your menu settings. You can just dial down the brightness on your phone to make that screen a little bit darker. You'll see it a lot better when you're outside in the dark, and you don't need a really, really bright screen because your eyes will adjust. You'll be able to pick up a very dim screen in a very dark setting. You can also turn off your lock screen if you want. So some lock screens, they might require kind of facial recognition or fingerprint or a PIN code. If you can imagine, if you're taking 20 photos throughout the night, or 200 photos throughout the night, and you have to unlock your screen every single time you take a picture, it can become a bit of a nuisance. So if that's something that's easy for you to do before you go out for the night, then I recommend doing that. And then when you're done photographing for the night, just put your lock screen back on. Make sure the flash is off. I showed you how to do that, at least on the iPhones there. And then set your image quality as high as possible. This is optional, but if you go into your camera mode settings, you should be able to find a way to have the most optimal, the highest number of megapixels, the highest quality image so that you can get the most detail out of your Northern Lights picture. And then last but not least, before you go out into the cold, it's not a bad idea just to take some handheld test shots to make sure you know where everything is. Somewhere where there's no light, you can practice that in the dark just to make sure you know where everything is and that everything is working on your smartphone. So some of these things I might do inside, but some of them I'll do outside. Extend your tripod, make sure it's at the right height. I like to start usually about shoulder level so I don't have to crouch down or I don't have to look up at my smartphone. You can attach the smartphone mount to the tripod. Like I said, we have tripods and smartphone mounts in Churchill for you to use. And then you're going to want to start with your smartphone in the landscape position. By having your smartphone in the landscape position like this, it's going to give you the best image quality. So that's where I like to start. You can always change things up and go into the portrait position, but I usually like to start in landscape. Next, I want to make sure, of course, I'm wearing my gloves because I'm outside, but also know where my assigned pockets are. So I've got my chest pocket that I keep my battery and my lens cloth in, and then I've got my hand warmers in my other pockets. I know my power bank is inside, ready to recharge my smartphone just in case it gets really cold and loses battery quickly. And my headlamp is on my head, and I know how to use the red setting. And then once I'm all set up and I know where everything is, I've got my camera or my smartphone on the tripod ready to go. I will go move somewhere so that I have a nice composition. So I'll find myself a nice patch of trees, or I'll look for the TP or the structure or the people that I want to photograph, and I'll go from there. And now everybody, this is where the fun begins. We've got the phone all set up. We've basically prepared ourselves as best we can for our experience of photographing the Northern Lights. I like to take a few test shots, even if there's no Northern Lights in the sky. If it's just dark, I'll take some test shots to make sure that everything's working. I'll usually replace my smartphone in my chest pocket or in my pocket next to a hand warmer or inside on the power bank after maybe 10 or 20 shots. And especially if it's very cold. If it's around -40, smartphones don't last too long with the cold. They get cold very quickly. So I'll take a few photos, I'll put it back in my pocket or bring it inside. And then of course, once it's inside, if it hasn't gotten too cold and completely died, then I'll plug it into my power bank to give it a jolt of battery and warm it up again. And then repeat. So take some pictures, warm the phone up, take some pictures, warm the phone up, take some pictures, warm the phone up. And then just keep doing this throughout the night. Change your foreground. The aurora, if it's in the sky, is ever changing. And so your shots will always be changing. Pretty exciting. Thank you very much, everybody. That's it from me. I hope you've learned a thing or two and you feel better prepared to photograph the Northern Lights. It's going to be a phenomenal adventure into Canada's subarctic, and I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you again. Take care.